What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Apollo. So on Saturday the 4th of October, myself and my partner Jay, we went to Thorpe Park to go and experience Fright Nights. If you don't know what Fright Nights is, it is basically this theme park's version of a Halloween event that runs from the start of October to the end of October and is to encapsulate the night of fear, to make people be scared and to give themselves a little bit of something different to experience. Now with these events, similar to the likes of Alton Towers Scarefest or Chesterton's Halloween, there's a few different offerings that come with Thorpe Park Fright Nights. You have your scare mazes, you have your scare zones, you have your general shows, and of course rides in the dark. Now for us, we wanted to go to Fright Nights for a very long time. Since our first visit in April, not only have we been clamouring to go back to Thorpe Park Fright Nights, but we'd also just been clamouring in general to go back to Thorpe Park, go and experience some of the great attractions and offerings that they have, and see how it compares to our regular offerings at Alton Towers or Drayton Manor. Now, as you can see, it was going to be a very special day. It was going to be all sighting. I'd even done a vlog. Look, here's footage of it. There's me, all nice and happy, looking really joyful, really positive about the day. But, things unfortunately did not work out the way as expected. Now, over the weekend of Friday the 3rd of October to Sunday the 5th, Storm Amy took hold on the UK. It was absolutely bad weather across the UK. Really torrential rain on the Friday, strong winds effects on the Friday to Saturday, and it ultimately meant for all parks in general that ride availability was very shocking. And unfortunately, we came across that at Thorpe Park on Saturday the 4th, which resulted in a pretty disappointing first few hours for the day. Now, I do want to kind of just quickly talk about, ride closures and ultimately adverse weather. As somebody that happens to work at a theme park and now understands the impact that this can have and why this happens, it's often frustrating when you go to a theme park and you have these closures. You're a bit miffled, you're a bit baffled by why it happens, and especially we were with a lot of people amongst us within queue lines and just generally walking around the park. You can feel a sense of I'm trying to think what the word is here. Just not a clear sense of understanding of why parks close. So when it comes to adverse weather, it can mean a load of difficult things. It can be lightning storms within a certain mile radius from the rides. It can be wind speeds, unfortunately, just being too high for rides to operate in. And in this case, it was a wind speed issue. Now, Thorpe Park and rides in general across theme parks will have a certain limit of how wind speeds can be. It must be at a certain miles per hour, otherwise rides just won't run. The nature of this really is because, although it's highly unlikely to happen, it never throws out the possibility of rides getting stuck. So in the instance of Hyperia, let's say if the wind speeds are too high, there's always a good chance that it could end up valleying. And not only does that mean, an evacuation for the guests that are possibly aboard on the train, but it also means, as a general whole consensus for the day, the ride will be closed as the train needs to be removed from the track. It can also possibly mean, in the very unlikely circumstances, it doesn't mean it's impossible. Trains can get taken off from the track if the weather is too adverse. Now, that is the exact issue that we did come across on Saturday. You can see it from a lot of YouTubers or people that went to the event on the day, from pretty much the opening of 10 AM till about 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock. It was a pretty shoddy day to go there and be in attendance at Thorpe Park. Now, I can fully understand rides not being able to open with the adverse weather. Like I said, as somebody who happens to experience this day in, day out now, I fully understand why this happens. I don't personally like it, but ultimately, you understand it a lot more. The issue I have is, it's not as if these are wind speeds that will just fluctuate. Throughout most of the day, the only rides that were really open were Rush and Walking Dead the Ride, an indoor roller coaster attraction, and a flat ride. Most of the other attractions were closed. I think the only ones that were open were the 4D Cinema and Double Tea Party, which is pretty interesting given some of the other stuff that could have been open but wasn't. The problem I have is you have rides that are open for a brief period of time and then will reclose again because of the wind speeds. It's not as if these wind speeds are just instantly died down. It's almost as if it's gone below the threshold, we can now open the ride, but then as soon as it's gone back up it, then that's it. For me personally, either have the rides closed completely from that point on, or just, say balls to it and go for it, because it's not really fair. Like, we got in the queue for Stealth at one point. Got all the way to the station and it had to close because of adverse weather. It must have been open for about 20 minutes, and it was the same for a lot of the rides across the park. Because there was so little open, especially at the opening start of the day, the amount of queues built up. It saw at one point The Walking Dead get 140 minutes of queue line, and bear in mind this had no actors in it as well. It's very questionable decision making, and that's, for me personally, what kind of spoiled the first half of that day. However, the evening towards the end of Fright Nights for us was a really superb event, and it's really something that made me clamour more to go and experience Thorpe Park Fright Nights. In terms of what we actually did go and experience, and in the end, we in total experienced 14 attractions, 15 experiences. Now, myself and Jay, we did kind of do separate attractions. The only thing that really changed for either of us is she went and did a ride on Nemesis Inferno, I went and did a ride on Saw the Ride. So that's the only real difference there. But in terms of overall what was experienced, we started the day with Walking Dead, the ride on the front row, and then we go and did Rush, and then we waited around for Double Tea Party. At that point, we was waiting around for Stealth to open at 12 o'clock. It did come to open, queued for it, closed, and then it was a little bit of like, what do we really do now? We ended up sitting around, waiting for a bit, and then we went and headed over to the Swarm as it did open. It was on a 75-minute queue, just didn't really have much else to do. Now, by the time we did get on that, it was around 10 past 4 o'clock-ish. At that point, the mazes had been open for 1 hour afterwards, and Fright Nights had really started to kick in. But unfortunately, we did miss the opening ceremony. Now, whilst we were in this queue for the Swarm, survival games didn't open on time. However, it would open literally as soon as we came off the ride. So I had my ride on Swarm back row, and then I went and did the survival games. I went and also did Trailers, Stitches, and Deadbeat. Following that, I went and joined the single rider queue for Hyperia. Had an amazing night ride on that, and really made me fall in love with that coaster a lot more since the first time I experienced it. Had my first ever ride at Stealth, and I've got to say, much more of an upgrade over Rita. Had my single rider ride on Saw the Ride, then went back over to do more Fright Nights events in Purgatory Town, and finally go and experience Crows of Morky Meadow Scare Zone, which opened a little bit later on. And then went and finished off with another night ride on Stealth, and finally Colossus. We wanted to finish on Swarm, but they closed the queue 15 minutes early. So a decent set of days there, decent set of attractions there, I should say. However, nothing particularly, for me personally, and that was the thing that was coming out of this trip, didn't exactly feel like I was able to maximise my day out of Thorpe Park Fright Nights. Now, I'm going to cover this a little bit more later on in this video, but essentially what I wanted this video to really be was to have been a vlog from the day, and unfortunately, just because of the points of the fact that we never got to really experience much in that morning, and it got to a point where we just want to go and enjoy our day, the footage really wasn't that much, and I wanted to do a little bit of an in-depth review on the mazes whilst I was there. So what we're going to do now is, instead of that, unfortunately, I'm just going to give you a quick rundown on what I thought of the mazes, going from what I think was the least favourite experience to my most favourite experience, and trying to get a bit of resemblance out of it there. Now, Thorpe Park Fright Nights attractions, in terms of the lineup this year, wasn't offering anything new as such. The only real new addition this year would be the Scare Zone of Purgatory Town, which we relocated around Big Easy Boulevard. However, I'm not really going to talk about this, mainly because it was so small of an attraction, and also compared to Crows and Walking Meadow, I wouldn't really consider it much of anything in terms of an offering for Fright Nights. It just felt like they had to include another Scare Zone because they had like some sort of leftover budget, which I think could have been went elsewhere, but that's just my opinion. Now, throughout all of these mazes, bear in mind I did experience all 4 of the mazes and Crows on Walking Meadow Scare Zone, which is a free Scare Zone that can be, experienced by anybody. It's no upcharge. For me personally, the overriding theme that I got from this year's event was the lack of actors. Now, I'm going to touch on it in Stitches because I think that's where it mostly showed up. But in a lot of the scenes throughout the mazes, it definitely felt like there was an abundance of actors. Moments where you know that more actors really help solve the scene moments. But it unfortunately just felt a little bit lackluster, and you ended up walking through it not feeling like you'd garnered the full experience. Some mazes did it better, some mazes didn't do it as such. But I think overall, for the package that was being offered, I really enjoyed myself. I think they're 4 different themes, 4 showroom mazes that really help to reinvigorate themselves every year when they incorporate new scenes, and I think that's something, unlike Alton Towers, is something that they really should be considering going forward. Now obviously, if you haven't done any of the mazes before, there are going to be some spoilers that I'm going to touch upon in this quick real review for the mazes, so if you don't want to watch, please go and skip ahead or go and watch a video, something else on the channel. But otherwise, let's get straight into it and talk about the first maze that I experienced, was Survival Games. Now Survival Games, it's located on Swarm Island towards the back of the station and behind the toilets in the area. Kind of as you're coming into Swarm Island, it's right on the right, you'll see a big sign. It's a little mini pathway that takes you down into like the shipping style container maze, similar to what you'd find at Compound at Alton Towers. Now Survival Games came into the theme park Fright Nights for 2022, was kind of built as this free flow, intense run through. You're basically a contestant within this survival game. There's a bunch of assassins trying to kill you, trying to claim you as the prize, and you're trying to get to the end of it, which will result in the fame and the money. Now, like I said, over the years, Thorpe Park Fright Nights tends to redevelop their mazes. They'll add new scenes, update storylines, and overall try and refresh the content. And I know for a few years that Survival Games, whilst it did pick up in the intensity, the overall sense of structure and style for the attraction never really changed. However, for 2025, it's definitely seen the biggest upgrade compared to the 3 mazes. From straight off, sorry. It is now a linear maze. There is no more free flow aspect. You could get separated by the actors within the maze. However, for the majority of the maze, you will be stuck with your group. Now, I went in with a group of 8. However, more so towards the end of the maze, I actually did get split up and was going more so towards it through myself, which I think is a really big positive there. Now, in terms of the storyline this year, it's still the same essence of you're this player who's trying to win this game and survive and create fame and fortune. However, the twist is now that there's kind of this drug that they've introduced, and it's turning these contestants into mindless creatures that are, you know, desperate to kill you now. There's a new edge to it, and I really liked it. It really helped build the intensity and also provide a different dynamic to the storyline, which is kind of cliche, kind of a simple take on it. Straight off, scares were really well done in this. What I liked about Survival Games was the different changes, environments. We go from the beginning of the maze where you've got all the cages, you know, the TV's introducing the game to you, and then instantly you've got these test subjects running out from the cages, banging away, trying to scare you, to the guards sending you through. You go through some pitch black rooms that, honest to God, you couldn't see a thing in them. You were just trying to feel your way through them. It was absolutely superb. And then you come to the arena zone towards the end of it, where you've got those, you know, forgotten subjects that are still running around the maze trying to get out. You've still got the partially assassins, partially corrupted by the drug, Cyrex, I think it was called, trying to kill you as well. And then you've also got the survival game guards itself that are trying to escort you through the maze, but also make sure that, you know, they're not giving you a free pass. I really, really enjoyed it. Apart from 1 or 2 points where I think there could have been done with a little bit more scare actors, especially in one of those pitch black scenes. I think that would have really topped it off. I think it was really superb, a really intense feeling. Even though it kind of lost that free flow aspect, which I would have liked to experience from the games. If overall, having that linear way and being able to tell a bit more of a story now, it means that everybody's going to get the same run through. You're not going to be sitting there thinking, oh, I wish I'd gone this way, wish I'd gone that way. And then you get to the end, it's the classic chainsaw. Now, I don't normally jump for chainsaws, especially in the Altonville mine tours, but even I was very startled by it. It really does get you on edge when you're in that close-knitted quarters. You know, I ended up getting put into an isolation pod by one of the game's players. The amount of times they come up to you right to your face and trying to scare you there. It's a really well done maze, and for me it was probably one of my favourites that I experienced on the night. Just that straight up intensity from start to finish. It doesn't let up. You know, that's what you want to be. You want to be kept on the edge, and that's what I think Survival Games did really well. The only thing I would like to see improve with that one, really, if they keep that same similar style, is, like I said, just a few more actors, and I do just think it could have been a tad bit scarier, especially some of them that are clearly meant to be under the influence of the drug. Sometimes the scares didn't really massively come about because they spent more time lurching and leaking over themselves rather than trying to jump out and grab at you. But you know, it's one of those newer things. It's something that they'll work on, but I definitely think Survivor Games, for me, was a really good standout attraction this year. Following on from that, I went over towards Nemesis Inferno and went and experienced Trailers. Now, Trailers is also a maze that's been here for quite a while as well, but whereas Survivor Games kind of follows the same story with just a few different scene changes, Trailers is really more of an adaptive one that has a lot more flexibility in it. Trailers is essentially, you're walking through a Super Spark cinema and you're going through these different movie scenes, some that reference kind of the old attractions / rides of Thorpe Park, and then some of them that are just like some general takes on classic horror movies. Straight off the bat, I thought this was another really good invention, and for me personally, probably the scariest of the 4 mazes, just because there were some really well done scenes. I love the big top one where it's Bozo's playground. There's some really good jump out moments there. Creek Freak Massacre's scene in there with the one guard that's trying to chop you down with a hatchet. She runs across the cage as she's trying to get to you. I thought even X23, I think it was, one of the newest scenes towards the end was done really well, as the guy's just keeping you towards the edge of the room. You've got this really laid out table with, you know, this mangled human being. It's insane to watch. And then you get to the end of it, all the scenes have been kind of wrapped up and they've all escaped from the trailer cinema rooms. They're all running loose in the cinema. There's a really great scene where there's like this big burst of pyro that comes out through the corner, and it really helps to establish a set piece. Whilst you're getting attacked by like Bozo, you're getting attacked by these strange doctors, people from the Creek Freak Massacre. You know, it's like the cinema's bled out and it's now loosing havoc on the park. It was a really well done, nice strobe little bit towards the end as you run on out through there. That was also another one that I felt like, whilst it had a nice amount of actors, it still could have been kept up more with some of the scares. You know, I think for me, when some of the scenes you went through, like especially the one with the Vulcan Peak, Platform 15, although that was a really good, well done one, the guy walking across the floor and crawling to you. Again, I think that's one that could have done with a few more actors. It definitely felt like there was a missed opportunity with some of the actors in there, but overall, scare-wise, it really definitely delivered. Question is, will it return next year? It probably will, given the longevity that it can have. Like I said, when you base yourself around movie trailers, you can just reinvent it to any other movie. You know, there's some of like Nightmare on Elm Street, you know, that really reference there. You can start with referencing stuff from Scream, from Halloween, from Friday the 13th. You know, and bear in mind, this is a park that's had licensed mazes before. You know, we could even see a Saw something in there. I think there's some really good opportunities for what they can do in trailers. It's just something that I think, once again, needed a bit more actors and just needed a little bit more scares to be delivered upon, and that's something I think that would have really set trailers over the top for this year. Following on from that, I went and queued up for the longest maze of the night, Deadbeat. Deadbeat was introduced last year for 2024 as the new addition to the Fright Nights lineup. This one kind of fits a lot more into what Fright Nights and overall the Thorpe Park marketing and just general target audience is going for. It's a nightclub set within the heart of Thorpe Park. DJ Maestro, whatever his name is, and you'll come to this end of night rave in this club. It's the most popular club, you know, the Deadbeat Club. You essentially, that's where you want to be, because it's the end of night passage. Now, going into this maze, I'd seen a few reviews from it last year. I loved the theming of it. You're walking through, you go through the lobby section, you go a lot around this underground garage bit. The smell in there is ridiculously insane. You know, it's so gross, it's so impressive to see. You walk through that, you go through the valet bit and into the actual club itself. The loud music, you got the person dancing on the pole right at the front as they're trying to scare you. You know, you're going through the bar room, you're going through like the back of the bar and the club. There's some really nice set pieces in there. I think the bit that I really liked particularly was towards the end, where you come across these monsters that have now, you know, they're taking your soul. The club's completely changed the vibe. That last bit with the strobe maze, I think that's a really well done scene. Now, apart from a brief story change, where essentially it was acknowledged by the DJ that, you know, we've come to take your soul, that's why you're here. There is no escape. You know, you're all idiots. You've been consumed by greed. You've been consumed by the idea that you're going to be having a rave, when in actuality, you are now just puppets to my monsters. I thought that was a nice change, at least, even though it was pretty much, you could tell from the story what it was going to be last year. It's now made a bit obvious. But apart from that, that was the only real change that was made to the maze. And for me personally, this year, it was probably the weakest one that I did experience. Like I said, I love the theming, and I think storyline wise it does fit for what Thorpe Park is going for. But for me personally, I just didn't feel that scared at all in it. When most of your actors are just the possessed people with souls. Bear in mind, you get batched in really large groups, about 14 to 17 with this one. I started to split off a little bit and more so towards the front, and it got to the point where I deliberately wanted to be at the front of the group because I wanted to feel scared. Now, apart from a few set pieces that are doing really well, especially the monsters crawling from the top of you across the beams, there's like 1 or 2 dark rooms where they just randomly appear at you. For the most part, they didn't really interact with me as such, and I didn't really feel like I was getting that scare purpose from them. When they're meant to be taking my souls, I want to feel like I'm being interacted with a little bit more. And I just didn't feel like they were doing that, almost like they were kind of holding back on it. To which point I walked out and just felt like, alright, it's, you know, it's not the scariest of mazes, would I say, but it's just such a well-themed maze. Now, for me, again, that one's just very simple. You just make it scarier. You tell your actors to go a little bit more into depth with it, and maybe place a little bit more in towards the strobing section, because for the most part, it's made up by the possessed souls of the dancers. But don't get me wrong, the theming of it I love, and I think, like I said, for what Thorpe Park's target audience is, I think that's what the maze should be, you know, built around. And it's a really good idea. It just needs to be a little bit scarier and needs to offer something a little bit more going forward. Last but not least then, we're going to come on to Stitches, winning an award for being, you know, best horror maze in the UK. And straight off the bat, it certainly delivered. This was the one I was probably the most looking forward to, just on the theming and some of the scenes that you do see. You know, you enter into Howard's Toy Emporium, and it's basically you get to meet the toy maker and see her latest creations, and you clearly see the twisted mind that she has on, you know, creating these toys, from, you know, scary clowns, spooky dolls. You've got these corrupted workers that are obsessed with turning you into the toy. There's some really great scenes there. I led the group and got some great scares, especially towards when you come to the Christmas scene with the elf, as she tells you to go through the packing machine. You know, she's putting on a lot of effort there to go and scare you, and she definitely got me. I loved going through towards the like old toys where you've got the chimpanzee with the banging drums there, the clown with the mask on. I thought we did really well. And then you get to the ending bit where you're going through the strobe maze and there's a bunch of the dolls with the masks on that are clearly corrupted humans. But for me, that was the point where I sat there and realised this is a bit of a problem. That's the one scene that for me needed the most amount of actors, and I believe there was only actually one person in there that was actually the doll. Now, it's very possible there was more and I just may have missed it through, or they just never got to me, but I only saw one of them in there, and that for me should be the scariest bit, because as soon as you see it, you know that a few of these dolls have got to be real and some of them are going to be fake. You just can't tell which one. But to not see more than one of them was very disappointing, to the point where you're walking out the maze, you're right near the exit, and you know there should be someone else there. You're looking around, making sure, but there's no one there. It was a very disappointing end to what I thought was a really strong maze. To me, it was the strongest maze of the evening, let down by a really disappointing ending. And he kind of does summarise what a lot of Thorpe Park was experiencing, and you could argue the same for just Merlin as a whole. When the budgets come down and the lack of acting, it does really seem like it wasn't something that was top priority when it should be in these mazes. You know, bear in mind, these mazes aren't cheap. It's like 30 something quid to pay for all 4 of these attractions. And although, like I said, the ending was a little bit disappointing, it certainly made up throughout the whole of the maze, and overall just felt like a really strong experience. Again, it could do with a few more scene changes, because from what I've seen online, it definitely seems to have been the same as it has been for the last few years. However, Stitches, I think, is a core of Thorpe Park Fright Nights and needs to return in the future. But so for me, in terms of the order, we go from Deadbeat as being the weakest, Trailers, Survival Games, and Stitches. Now obviously Crows and Walking Meadows kind of been the same for this year. It's seen a bit of an expansion, some really great scenes and scares in there, along with some very tense atmospheric moments, especially when you do it in the night time. You've got to do it then, because otherwise you lose the magic of the effect. Really nice great bits of fog, some really atmospheric and atmospheric experiences when you're walking through, especially like the kind of barnyard scene, or you see like the burning hay with the witch on there. Not to mention the scarecrows themselves, just generally seeing them for the first time. They are bloody scary. Some of them just sat down and you can see them with their eyes open as they twitch about at you. You know, they're done really well. Again, it's an ending that's a little bit disappointing because you feel like there could have been an actor at the end there, another scarecrow or something. But overall, such an atmospheric experience there from the Crows of Morecambe Meadow. So with that brief run through there of the scare mazes and scare zones, whilst I've tried my best to try and explain my feelings and thoughts, I'll never do the justice of actually going there, experiencing it yourself. Because for me overall, I really enjoyed what I experienced at Fright Nights. I loved the mazes, you know, it really helped me sense that I want to be scared now, and to go through each maze and kind of build up that expectation. I think Thorpe's done a really well job. They're 4 great attractions, although I think some of them just could have used a few more actors. Crows on Morecambe Meadow was a really nice addition. I'm not personally a fan of shows, so like Creature Campus and Lucifer's Lair, stuff like that, I wasn't really massively invested on, so I'm not really going to talk about it. However, if that's your cup of tea, then go and watch them, because they do put on some brilliant set pieces. Just make sure obviously the weather's ideal, otherwise you're going to miss that. In terms of rides in the dark, Hyperion definitely stole the show for me. It is so much more enjoyable than the first time I experienced it. You know, not only is it just a superb roller coaster as it is, but going to experience it at night and barely seeing those elements, you know, it really does help to paint the picture. Not to mention when you reach the top of the lift though and just have a general look over Thorpe Park and London area. It looks superb. Stealth at night is amazingly good. The flashlight blinding you as you reach the crescendo of the top of the spike. Superb. And then also just general lighting around the park. I wouldn't say Colossus, it's bloody rough, especially on the back row. Do not do it on the back row. Swarm would have been superb. Nemesis Inferno could have done with a bit better lighting, but you know, and make of it what you will. Now, in terms of somebody that, you know, is a regular to Alton Towers, somebody that's experienced Scarefest from last year and will be experiencing it from this year, what is the better one of the two? Which one do you really feel like is worth your money? Now, bear in mind, this is all based on your opinion. It's what you prefer, your location, whatever you think's better for you. For me personally, for a Halloween outing, I would go with Alton Towers Scarefest. It's built for a park, built for everyone of all ages. You've obviously got your thrills and frights for the older ones. You've got your scare zones for kind of those medium grounds. Plus, not to mention some of the younger offerings as well, like Amigos in the Afterlife and Haribo Trick or Treat Town. Not to mention some of the series and general shows. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean Thorpe Park doesn't feel like a Halloween event, because it does. However, it doesn't have the theming around the park. And if you took away the mazes from the actual experience of Fright Nights, you wouldn't really ever consider it to be a Halloween event. You would just happen to consider it a Halloween event because there's scare mazes. There's no real theming around the park apart from Purgatory Town and the scare zones. You know, yes, there's atmospheric lighting and the music does kind of change. But for the most part, it just feels like Thorpe Park, just with, you know, rides going on past 7 o'clock. So again, it's make of it what you will. It's for the target audience. Thorpe Park is a much better evening out, but for an overall Halloween package, I would consider Alton Towers Scarefest. And that just kind of sums up my thoughts and feelings towards Thorpe Park Fright Nights. I really enjoyed the event. Hopefully we'll get to go and experience it again next year and in the coming years soon. Not to mention just get to go back to Thorpe Park again, because I really do love the park from what I've seen this year. Can't help but feel like it kind of needs something a little bit new now. Don't get me wrong, Hyperion is great and all, but when you've got the likes of Zodiac not working, Samurai not working, Ghost Train being a massive failure that it is, not to mention, you know, just genuinely just feeling like it doesn't have the same level of offerings as an Alton Towers. I think sometimes it needs to be having a refresh, and who knows what's going to happen with Thorpe Park next, but I can definitely feel like we're on the verge of potentially a new roller coaster or something new offerings going on there. But I really love what I've saw for Thorpe Park this year, and I can't wait to go and experience it again. Now, if you have enjoyed this video, please do leave a like, subscribe to the channel where you get to see more content like this. We are going to be covering Alton Towers Scarefest from a guest point of view rather than an employee, so we'll get to see how that goes, so do keep that checked out. But for now, as I did manage to record some footage, here's a little bit of what I did manage to record, including a few just general captures and a few night rides I've seen at the park. So I hope you have enjoyed, and we'll see you for the next video.